been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
I want to retire comfortably, but I'm worried I've waited too long for that to be possible. I'm 43 and only have about $250,000 in all my retirement accounts. What advice can you give me to try to retire well? Love this question to end on, John, because we've had a $3.7 million net worth. We've had a $2 million net worth. There may be a lot of people out there going, oh, that's not me. I'm never going to be that. Can I even do this? And Martin is right there, right? $250,000 at 43. There's probably a lot of people watching and listening that are in that same position as Martin going, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I'm going to make it. Well, the first thing I would say to Martin and anybody else out there in the same position, you have not waited too long. At 43, Martin still potentially has 2 decades of work life and contributions left to grow that nest egg from $250,000. As long as Martin doesn't want to retire tomorrow or in the next 3 or 4 years, there's still plenty of time.
Scott, you've got to remind Martin about the rule of 72
Yeah.
and use the rule of 72. This is a mathematical formula that basically gives you a general idea. It's not a guarantee or anything of that nature, but is a general idea about how money works. And if you take the rule of 72 and apply it to Martin's situation, he's actually going to do pretty well. He's got $250,000 right now. If Martin gets a 10% return on average on that $250,000 over the next 20 years, and you go 10% return, how's that possible? Well, the S&P 500 has averaged about 10% over the last 20 or 30 years, long-term average. And so by investing it properly, you can get a double-digit return like that. That return is hypothetical. It's not representative of any type of investment per se, but the S&P 500 as a proxy for the stock market has had a track record of averaging in that 10% range. All that being said, if you think about what Martin is doing here, is if he just takes that $250,000, he could have $2 million by age 65 if he just allows that to be invested properly, leave it alone, and let it grow. Now, that doesn't mean anything about what Martin could add to it in terms of accumulating additional dollars.
Yeah, and I say this often too, John. I become a firm believer in the number one thing you can do to create true financial independence is to create margin in your life. And by that, I mean a spread between your income and your expenses. And I think that's the question for Martin. Where is that margin? Do you need to increase income? Do you need to lower expenses? Do you need to do both? Because that's where you're going to get the cash flow to increase your contributions. And I would even say max out your retirement contributions, whatever. We don't know what options Martin has, but if he's got a 401k and he's closing in on age 50, by the time he gets to age 50, it's going to be higher than that by the time he gets there. But right now, someone turning age 50 can get over $30,000 into their 401k.
Yep.
And that does not exclude them, John, from potentially still on the outside of that contributing to a traditional or Roth IRA.
Scott, I'll tell you, another thing that could happen here is that if Martin is industrious and he creates a little side gig, he could throw a ton of money into that retirement because he's not living on that money now. And so if he added even $1,000 a month in a side gig, that's a huge boost to his trip down financial independence territory. And I think that another thing that Martin's got to do here, Scott, is he's got to be sure to control his mindset because he's come at this from the standpoint of, I think I might be too late. It is not too late. You have to bow up on this thing, as I like to say. You've got to keep a proper perspective on things like market variations and not allow a recession that's likely to come along in the next 20 years. Almost assuredly, we're going to have a recession. I don't know when. People have been talking about it for the last 3 or 4 years. Yep. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. But you have to keep the right perspective on that recession and understand what you're doing. If you're accumulating money into your retirement account, you're actually buying more shares than you could have bought if the price were higher. And that price will eventually at some point in time go back up more than likely. So you've got to understand kind of the dynamic of what you're working with here. But the main thing that I want to say is that it's really all about your mindset, your determination, and your focus. And I think that's where a financial advisor could do Martin a lot of good, to be that coach, to come alongside him and be that voice in his ear, that reasoned voice that really does kind of cut through all of the noise that Martin might hear otherwise about his effort to become financially independent.
You know, we sat in on a call with First Trust advisors earlier this week, and they're a partner of ours, an investment company. You can go out and look at them online, but we use some of their investments in our clients' portfolio, and we were getting their outlook from their equity strategist about what to look for in 2025, you know, and their expectations are dampened a little bit compared to the last 2 years where we've accelerated north of 20% returns in the S&P 500. But he went through all the particulars about why things might be slowing down and where there might still be some opportunities, and it may have been in his mind sounding a little negative, and he ended it with this. He said, but stay invested. Don't get out of the market. And to your point, he was saying,
that's right.
He said he's been in the business for 30 plus years, and he's never talked to anybody who got out of the market and was able to find the right time to get back in. So that mindset is critical. We're going to have a downturn, but for people in Martin's situation, people who are even closing in closer to retirement, you can't afford to let that drop you out of the market, take you out of the market, because his point was, when are you going to get back in? Because it's going to start going up, and you're going to go, oh, maybe it'll go back down again, and then I'll get back in, when then it never does. Yeah.
And people who try to time the market generally are going to lose that bet, because there is no rhyme or reason to it. The without a doubt, and I know it sounds boring and it's not, you know, anything that's real sexy or anything, but what you want to do is you just want to stay the course and stay invested. People, time and consistency in your actions and in your plan are going to help you drive financial independence more than just about anything else that you could do.
Next up, it's Sharon from Benton. From what I've heard, I feel pretty fortunate to have access to a pension. I've got the option to take a monthly pension or a one-time lump sum. The monthly option seems like a good idea, but I don't know if I'm missing something. So my question is, am I missing something? Thanks. Sharon, thank you for the question. And you are indeed very fortunate. Only 35% of Americans currently have a pension. And in the future, we certainly believe that number is going to be lower as pensions, especially in the private sector, continue to disappear. It's just become too much of a liability for corporations. They are eliminating them every day. We get a lot of calls from either current clients or prospective clients wanting to know about what decisions they should make about their pension because they're being bought out. Maybe they have an option for a lump sum, or they can take a monthly benefit at a date in the future. So let's walk through that for Sharon and other people, Tim. When you think about the pros and cons of either taking your pension as a monthly benefit or as a lump sum.
Yes, there's going to be multiple options of what you can actually do with that pension. Oftentimes, sometimes you don't have the lump sum option. So really that option might not even exist to you. But oftentimes, if you're married, you're going to have options of whether to take it single life, joint life, and all kinds of other things that we can sit down with our clients once we build an income plan and determine which scenario is the best. But for pensions, as you said, that monthly benefit sounds like a good idea. And that is one of the pros of a pension is it's a guaranteed lifetime income. So you're going to get a monthly check starting the month after you retire normally, or at least the full retirement age if you potentially retire a few years before that, and get a full monthly check that's going to start at some point in time and continue until your death. So that's one great pro for a pension. Also, depending on available options, the spouse may have a lifetime income as well. So I mentioned earlier, if you're married, you got that joint option. Sometimes you can have that spouse receive a 50% benefit, 75% benefit. It all goes back to how much risk is the insurance company or the pension plan taking on. And so your amounts are going to vary just a little bit based on that, and they will be lower if you give your spouse a benefit. But then when layered on top of Social Security, this could create a very sizable amount of retirement income that could take a lot of risk out of your retirement income plan, because guaranteed income, that mailbox money that hits your door every month, we want to make sure that your required expenses that you're having every month are met by required and guaranteed income. And so having a Social Security payment or 2 Social Security payments and a pension, oftentimes that will guarantee you that you've got that mailbox money to make sure that you are living a good life that's going to meet your dignity and pay for your dignity as far as all the way throughout retirement, so you don't have to be a burden to any others, your kids especially. That's one of the concerns people have. And also that we're not going to run out of money as far as we are going to have that guaranteed check. But cons, unless you have a public pension, likely that check that you receive, that first check, will be the same amount all the way through retirement. So there's no cost of living adjustments. And so that is one definite drawback on taking that pension month after month, because after 15 or 20 years, that $3,000 check that you're receiving, it's still $3,000, but cost of living may have gone up to $4,500 or $5,000. So that is a con. And if something happens to you early in retirement, you really didn't receive much of a benefit. So I've known people in the past that have taken the guaranteed monthly payment, but after 2 years they passed away. Well, that check ends, and also there's no lump sum, no payment that goes to your beneficiaries. So that's a con. And then you have to wait for the paycheck. You don't have the option to be able to, if something happens where you need to repair your car, repair your HVAC or something like that, you can't go to a lump sum if you had moved that over to an IRA and grab that money and pay that expense. You're actually having to wait for that next monthly paycheck to come in. And then depending on your other assets, if you have an emergency or lump sum purchases you'd like to make, you're not going to have much flexibility. Again, you're going to have to wait for that next check, and you're not going to be able to really have much that you're going to be able to access unless you have a lot of other IRA funds or something else that you have. But again, this goes back to making sure that your retirement income plan is not only going to provide enough monthly income for you, but also give you flexibility and options throughout retirement.
You may take the lump sum then?
Take the lump sum, Scott.
That was very good. So the pros and cons laid out there by Tim on taking it as a monthly check. How about the one-time lump sum? What do you need to consider? Well, the pros are it gives you a lot of flexibility and access to retirement dollars if needed. Tim just talked about you have to wait on the paycheck if you take it as a monthly benefit. But if you have the lump sum, you have more dollars. Now, of course, you want to plan to make sure you don't raid that and run out, but you do have an account value that will allow you a lot of flexibility and to be able to invest those dollars, which means they could also grow and you could have a larger account value. You can certainly use a portion of that lump sum to purchase an annuity, and if that's the case, you could actually have an annuity that would provide monthly guaranteed income. Tim talked about needing your required income met with guaranteed income on a monthly basis. So if you need $5,000 a month just to pay the bills in retirement, we believe very strongly you need $5,000 in guaranteed income to meet those monthly expenditures. So a pension as a monthly benefit can do that. But you could also take the one-time lump sum, roll it over into an IRA, which is a non-taxable event, and then you have an account value and maybe use a portion of that account value to purchase an annuity that would provide the monthly income you need for your required income and still have the account value. So now you kind of have the best of both worlds, if you will. You have an account value and you have the guaranteed income in case the account value goes to zero. If you have a short life, your beneficiaries would receive an inheritance and you have more control over your retirement. Now, the downside of taking the lump sum, it might require more discipline with spending. You don't want to roll through all of those assets. We kind of alluded to that in the first piece of this conversation. If you have a one-time lump sum, you have to be careful about when you tap it because you don't want to run out of money because you don't have the guaranteed check anymore. And depending on how you invest the lump sum, it certainly might increase the risk that you have to your retirement. Now, if that's not enough to tell you that that's a lot to consider and it highlights the need for an advisor. If you're in this situation and you'd like help determining which option is right for you, I want to encourage you to step through the Ready to Retire process. So I'm 63 and am considering retirement soon. I have a large amount of money in my 401k, which I have built up over the years. I may be oversimplifying the situation, but why shouldn't I just simply pull from my 401k what I need to live on above my Social Security? I'm sure I'm missing something. So help me out. Well, Mike, we are going to help you out, and here's where we would begin with that big risk. 401k plans, if you're planning to leave that in the 401k, there is an inherent risk to what we call sequence of return risk. So if you're going to randomly or even systematically pull money out of that 401k, it may be in a growth investment or multiple growth investments. Likely is because 401k plans are great accumulation vehicles. They have a lot of growth funds available in there. But as we've seen, as you've probably seen with your 401k in the last few months, that can take a hit at any given time. Short-term volatility is the price we pay for long-term growth. And if you lose 2 or 3 or 4% in value in that 401k and you're making withdrawals, that can deplete the value of your 401k in a much quicker fashion. John, we've seen study after study on this that can compare year to a different year, even month to a different month on when withdrawals began. And they may, in that comparison, those withdrawals may be the exact same amount, but because no one, including financial advisors, can control the order in which you get the returns in the market, that puts you at serious risk.
What you got to have is you got to have the right strategy. And hear me when I say this, that an investment is not necessarily a strategy. A strategy is how you actually execute the plan that you've put together. And that is why you don't necessarily want to leave it in the 401k. The 401k is an investment vehicle. It is not a financial plan. It is not a strategy by which you're going to execute income coming to you from that set of investments. And so sequence risk is one of the risks that is sitting out there in the midst of that 401k with no financial advisor attached to it, no one coaching you along the way, helping you to be sure that your strategy keeps you from executing on sequence of return risk and runs you out of money before you run out of time. That's one of the things that a plan does for you. Also, there is longevity risk. The fact that we are living longer, the fact that medical advances are causing us to live longer and longer. And by the way, we're trying to retire earlier and earlier. And what that does is it really just puts this rubber band tension on your assets. And when you think about running out of money, you don't want to be in a situation where you can't pay your basic living expenses because there's no money there left to pay with. What you want is regular, predictable income that is able to be continued throughout the rest of your life, regardless of how long your retirement is or how long you might live. And so that's what we call longevity risk. Yeah. I think one other thing, Scott, that we want to talk about, actually two other things. One is inflation risk. And we've seen that. Everybody ought to know that you've got to have some way of increasing your income over time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about next. And it was really drawing the two together, longevity risk and inflation risk. Because Mike says, why can I not just live on Social Security to pay my expenses and then use my 401k for what I need above and beyond my living expenses? And a key problem with that is Social Security is probably not going to keep up through the rest of your life with your living expenses. The cost of living adjustments on Social Security are usually tracking well below the overall senior inflation rate. Now, when I say senior inflation rate, is we've seen the cost of living adjustment on Social Security is set based on a 3-month time period late in the year, the average inflation rate in any given year. So if you go back to 2024, I think it's August, September, and October, if I recall, they averaged those months of the core inflation rate across the board in this country, and that is how they give the Social Security inflation-adjusted cost of living raise. However, that doesn't include things that seniors, some things that the seniors will be spending money on, like drugs, healthcare costs, those type of things. So, well,
and also you can see increases in Medicare costs almost vanquish any increase that you get in Social Security.
Yeah. So a key takeaway there is your Social Security is not likely to cover your living expenses for the duration of your retirement. So you still need to build in inflation-adjusted raises from your investments. So that goes back to needing some growth, John, which the 401k might be good at. But again, you need a strategy that encompasses both conservative investments for the money that you're taking now in retirement and growth investments for the money you need to take later because you're going to need to take larger withdrawals.
The last one, Scott, is unexpected expense risk. And this is when you just come up and say, you know what, I've got $50,000 I want to go spend on a car. Well, the question becomes, okay, how does that affect your overall plan and your ability to keep income flowing to you? It's kind of like the difference between milking a cow and eating steak. You know, if you go and kill the cow and get steak, then you're probably going to not have very much milk the next day. Yeah. So that's the whole issue with that unexpected expense risk. You've got to be able to plan for those and understand how they affect your overall long-term ability to produce income to you.
So to wrap up there, if you leave your money in your 401k, it might be difficult to avoid the risk you're going to face in retirement. And even if you decide to roll that money out of your 401k and get it into an IRA where you may have access to different types of investments, do you really want to go it alone and create your own investment strategy and kind of just willy-nilly decide I'm going to take this much out in March and this much out in October, and next year it might be different? Using a financial advisor who builds a retirement income plan can alleviate a lot of those problems, and I would encourage you to do that. I'm 63 and just inherited about $450,000. How do I make sure this money lasts and I'm making the smartest move with it? Kim, it's a great place to start with your focus being on how to make it last. If you're 63, you're probably getting close to, if you're not already into retirement. If you're not in retirement already, you're in the retirement red zone. So it becomes very important, what are you going to do with the $450,000? How can it help you achieve true financial independence? But the first thing, we have to identify where the $450,000 is, because that matters, John, from a potential tax implication.
Yeah, it could be in an inherited IRA account that maybe a parent left you or whatever the case may be. It could be life insurance death benefits. Just those two alone have stark differences in taxation. No taxation on the life insurance death benefit. There is full taxation on the IRA. And as we said earlier, you have to take that out over a 10-year period of time. Did the money come from a bank savings account? Did it come from a brokerage investment account? If so, you probably got a step up in what's called the cost basis, and you may not pay any tax on the principal that you invested. So there is a huge question about where this money is currently located, where its original source is. Now, I think that an accurate evaluation of where you currently are on your path to financial independence is really important here. This $450,000 has theoretically landed out of the blue. What else have you done to get prepared for retirement at 63 years old, I'm sorry. So obviously you've probably made some preparations there. There's Social Security. Maybe you've got a 401k plan or whatever. How does this play into the bigger picture? It's oftentimes, not a smart thing to do what I call mental accounting. And you basically take this $450,000 and say, okay, I'm going to put this label on that. And this over here is my other stuff. That's my retirement. Maybe the two need to be merged together in terms of creating an income stream for you, because that income stream is the first step toward that financial independence.
Yeah, and that incorporates her first question on how do I make sure the money lasts, because you don't know how long you're going to live, Kim, and we want to make sure it never runs out. But building that retirement income plan starts with evaluating your expenses. How much are you going to need to live on a monthly basis just for a basic lifestyle? And then we compare the other side of the equation there to what kind of guaranteed income sources are you going to have on a monthly basis. If you're 63, you are likely eligible for a reduced Social Security benefit, but is it time, if you're still working, it's not going to be time to take it yet, more than likely. But if you get closer to retirement, whenever you do actually step away from work, if you haven't already, you can evaluate, is that Social Security check going to be enough to provide myself with a basic lifestyle? If not, we would need to look at other investments to incorporate additional guaranteed income just so you can pay the bills. Now, beyond that, what does retirement look like? What do you want to do? What's the the quantifiable monthly income equivalent to what is my lifestyle going to look like. Where do I want to travel a lot, or am I going to stay at home? Those are two very big differences from a monthly income perspective. But then as we determine those numbers, you'll see, am I short or am I good? And if you're good, that $450,000 can be potentially earmarked for another reason. But if you need some or all of it to create the true financial independence you're looking for, then that would be incorporated, as John has already mentioned, into the overall plan. And how we do that, John, the investment strategy is vitally important here. We talked about at the beginning, Kim is either in retirement or she's in the retirement red zone.
Yeah, you've got to be prepared for, what happens as you approach retirement. There are some really not so great things that can happen if you have the money more aggressively invested as you head toward retirement. About the time you need it, the old saying of the 401k became a 201k. You don't want that to happen. Here's something else that I think I want to be sure to emphasize in this situation, Scott, is to get a plan regardless of what your goal is, and don't let the money just sit and be slowly spent on life, because for some strange reason, there's always something to spend money on. And it seems to, I don't want to wax mystic here or anything, but it seems like the forces of nature know when you get a bunch of money, because all of a sudden, all this stuff starts happening. And you got to spend it on this and you got to spend it on that. And sooner or later, you're going to wake up and go, that's all gone. And I was not intentional about it. I did not have my focus on what I needed to have it on. I was too busy putting out fires. And you have to ask yourself, okay, if those fires had occurred before I got this money, how would I have handled them? Oftentimes, that's the real kicker on lump sum money like that. It makes it really easy to go put out a fire. I think sometimes family members go, oh, well, Mom got that money. I'm going to just, I got this bill over here. I'm going to see if I can maybe talk her into sliding me a few dollars and help me out with this. And sooner or later, Scott, it slowly leaks out of your bank account to somewhere else, and your financial independence has gone with it.
You know what I also see is the opposite of that potentially. You put it over on the sidelines. You don't really want to invest it. You don't want to get it working for you because you're not sure what you're going to do with it. And if you don't make a plan, you could be looking up 2 years later. Let's say you did that a couple of years ago and the markets had a 40% run up and you were sitting on the sidelines trying to figure out what you were going to do with it.
Yeah.
When you could have incorporated it into your overall plan.
Oftentimes fear is a paralyzer, and that's what happens in those situations. You're fearful of making a decision on it, so your indecision becomes your decision.
And the plan is the antidote on both sides of that, right?
That's exactly right.
If you're worried about spending it, if you're worried about not spending it, it could happen. But getting a plan together can make all the difference. Let's get started with Nancy from Little Rock. And Nancy writes, I'm 59 and my husband is 62. We've done pretty well so far, and I'd like to retire early at 63, but I won't qualify for Medicare until I'm 65. What health coverage options should I look at to bridge that 2-year gap? Nancy, thanks for the question. So the first question that comes to mind when you tell us about your ages of you and your husband, is your spouse retiring with you? Because that's a big one there, and I'm going to assume that maybe he is, because one option for you if he wasn't is to stay on potentially his health care plan through his job if he has one, but maybe he doesn't have one. It would probably be the most cost-effective way in most cases to look towards his health care coverage. But Teresa, when you think about only having a 2-year gap, the next thing that comes to mind for me is taking a look if she has a COBRA plan option through work, which most employers do offer.
Yes, the benefit of that is that you get to keep the coverage you've had up to this point, so there's familiarity there while you're bridging the gap to your Medicare options. The kind of downfall to it is that it's going to be more expensive. COBRA coverage is usually not cost effective. So it's really important to look at your income. Maybe it's subsidized somehow if you use one of the marketplace options instead. look at your expenses and see if you can afford it. If you've been on some sort of care plan through your physician, though, where having the same coverage is really critical, that COBRA option overall may still be the best option for you.
Yeah, we don't know much about Nancy's health situation. So if she does have something that she needs coverage for, you really have to check out what plan you're moving toward, whether it's your husband's plan at work or obviously COBRA is the best option because you'll get the same plan. But the cost effectiveness, as Teresa mentioned, is a little bit more difficult because in essence, basically when you're getting health insurance through your employer, they're paying half of it, you're paying half of it. And when you go into or you're terminated or you retire, however you leave that job, you're taking on the full cost of that health care premium. So it could be potentially twice as much to carry, but typically the law will let you do that for 18 months. So when it is only 2 years, if you can deal with that cost, you're almost getting yourself to Medicare just by checking out that option.
I do think if you are looking at using the marketplace, let's say the COBRA is not realistic and you are going to be using the marketplace, something to understand about that is that coverage is not just comprehensive typically like your employer plan would have been. I know when I was shopping for that during a period of time when I was needing to use the marketplace before I worked here, I found that things like maternity care were not standard. You had to pay extra for those. So obviously you're probably past the point of that, but there are other things like your typical drug, prescriptions and things like that. You want to make sure you understand what the plan will cover, what the expenses out of pocket will be, because there might be more variance than you're used to looking for.
Yeah, and do you have an HSA, Nancy? That's one thing you didn't tell us in your question, a health savings account. That is a great option to start beefing up. Now, obviously, you're telling us in your question that you're 62 already and want to retire at 63, so you're not going to really be able to add to that right now or start one and get really anywhere with it in 12 months if you retire. But for everybody else listening, if a health savings account is an option, certainly an option is to take advantage of that because you can get money into it. And if you don't intend to use it in the near term, you should be investing it for growth so that you can have more in retirement. Healthcare costs is one of the largest costs you're going to have, one of the biggest expenses you're going to have in retirement. A Fidelity study fairly recently estimated that a 65-year-old couple will need $300,000 to spend out of pocket, and that's after Medicare age, right? That's after you reach Medicare. So those are things that are still going to be on you to pay for. So having a plan for that and having funds for that is certainly very important. The health savings account is a great way to build some tax-free income for healthcare expenses.
And I do want to clarify, there are different health savings account types out there. The health savings account that you're talking about is the one that is portable with you. There are these accounts called flexible spending accounts that employers offer. We have that here. That is a use it or lose it every single year plan. So I do want to clarify, if you have an FSA, it won't serve the same purpose as what Scott was talking about a moment ago.
Yeah, to be eligible for the HSA, you have to have a high deductible health insurance plan, and then it has to be offered. And once it is, you can put, I believe, is it $7,000 for family or $3,500 for individuals, something around
right,
that, as far as the annual.
It changes so often that I don't memorize those usually.
It is hard to keep up with. But a little bit of money can get in there, and then you can grow it for later use. You can also use it during your pre-retirement years too. But it goes in. It's actually double tax free because you can make a pre-tax contribution and then withdraw it tax-free if it is for a qualified health expense, and that list can be found online, or you can talk to an advisor to find out that list of what is covered in tax-free withdrawals. So certainly having more funds to pay for out-of-pocket health care costs would potentially save you on premiums because you could maybe get a plan that has a higher deductible and a smaller premium because you have the money to be able to handle those out-of-pocket expenses. And the other thing, too, is I would say don't get laser focused on just bridging the gap to Medicare. I think a lot of people, Teresa, feel like Medicare is the finish line. If I can just get, because honestly, the most popular age to retire in the United States is age 65. Why is that? Because I've made it to Medicare age. It has nothing to do with really anything else except I'm now on government-assisted health care. But Medicare A is not going to cover much. And when I say A, I'm saying
Part A.
Yeah, Part A is not going to cover, it's going to cover hospital care, and that's just about it. That's free. Your Part B premium will cost 108 starts at $185 a month per person, and if your income's higher, it could be more. That's going to cover more things, but you have to really educate yourself or get some help on looking through all of the Medigap policies, Part D, the prescription drug plan, and all of that type of thing.
And I encourage getting coaching on that. That's not necessarily something that I can do, but I encourage all of my clients to get coaching, and not just once, but every single year in retirement, because those drug plans especially, they change over time. So what may have been a great product for you last year, next year may not be a great product. So it's important to collaborate with your pharmacist and a good coach to help you each year pick the plan that's right for you.
All right, so before we move on, one thing that she said there that really stuck out to me too is she said, we've done pretty well so far. That's a little vague for me, Nancy. I'm going to be honest. What does that mean to you? You've done pretty well so far. What does your retirement income look like? Have you built a retirement income plan to know what you're going to receive monthly when you incorporate all sources of income like Social Security? Is there a pension? How much have you saved in your employer plans and other investments? And what is that going to mean to you in a monthly income stream? Done well on savings is a feeling. It's not a fact, right? And how does that translate into income? And I think the piece here, that the reason I bring that up mainly is everybody needs a retirement income plan, but Teresa, incorporating healthcare costs into that, because maybe their basic lifestyle that they want in retirement is going to be more than covered by the assets they have.
Yes.
They can start to really do some things for healthcare then.
Yes, I've joked before that some people want to go to Paris, Arkansas. Some people want to go to Paris, France. Those are two very different retirements, and your asset level for each of those is different. So it is really important to get some empirical data about where you stand before you pull that trigger. And the sooner you do that, the better, because if you need to make some adjustments, you've got the time to do it. But if you wait until you're retired, then it's just a matter of, well, we'll do what we can with what you've got. But I would love to get with you sooner so we can help you get a plan that works great for you, including the healthcare need.
The importance of not making a decision in a vacuum about anything when it comes to retirement and financial independence. Healthcare cannot be a standalone choice. It needs to be incorporated into a holistic retirement plan unique to you. Claire from Rogers asks, can you tell me more about indexed universal life investments? I've heard some about them lately, but I don't really know what they are or how to know if I need that in my portfolio. Claire, thanks very much. You're definitely going to hear a lot about them because they are advertised quite a bit. And John, I think there's been a real proliferation of this online and social media.
Yeah, there are apparently, from what I understand, some multi-level marketing organizations or strategies like that to market and push these things. And you always have to wonder, okay, so is this good for me or is it good for them?
Right.
And so, Index Universal Life has some positive characteristics to it. It also has some negative characteristics to it. It is just like any other financial product. It doesn't have a personality. It's not good or bad. It is a tool, and if the tool is used properly, it can be of value. And if the tool is used improperly, it can wreck your financial future if you depend on it. So I think it is with that context, Scott, that we jump into talk about indexed universal life. And let's kind of play off of the traditional whole life insurance policy. The traditional whole life insurance policy has lots of fixed attributes to it. The cash value is guaranteed. The death benefit is guaranteed. The interest rate is likely guaranteed, although they don't disclose what the interest rate is in a whole life policy. But an index universal life policy is basically exactly what it says. It is tied to an index or the return of an index in some way, shape, form, or fashion. The details of that can become convoluted as to how much of that index you actually get in terms of appreciation of the cash value. But it is at its heart a life insurance policy. It is a combination of decreasing term insurance and increasing cash value life insurance. And so when you think about this, you have to ask yourself, okay, what is it that I really am trying to achieve with this? And life insurance is for protecting your income. It is not for necessarily the accumulation of money. although it can serve that purpose if you run out of all of the other options to save money. But I've not ever really run into anybody that's run out of all the other options to save money, Scott. But there is a significant difference in an investment and an insurance policy.
Yeah, so I think you need to separate the two when you talk about insurance and investment. So let's take on a look at what an index universal life policy has from an investment perspective. And John talked about it. You're really talking about being tied to an index. So when we say an equity index, we're talking about something like the S&P 500. That's the one that most people are familiar with. It's also the one that's probably going to be the most common, but it's typically going to have a cap on the upside. So in other words, if any given year the S&P 500 index does 10%, there may be a cap of 6%. And these are just hypothetical, not certainly guaranteed for sure on any given product. But in other words, if the market does 10%, you only get 6% of that. So it's limiting, in that case, the upside of your investment. So from an investment perspective, we don't typically use, wouldn't think of using an index universal life policy for its investment opportunity, because of those gains being capped, John, and they may not give you the growth you need to achieve your financial goals.
And I think that's where the rub comes in as far as we're concerned with Index Universal Life and how it's marketed, because online there are a lot of either unqualified or slightly qualified people giving advice, telling people to take their money out of their 401k plan, pay the taxes on it, put it in the Index Universal Life, because Index Universal Life never goes down. And there is some validity to that statement that it never goes down, but there's also the dollar cost averaging that you're doing inside your 401k plan that ultimately works to your advantage if everything, continues to go up as the market has historically done. I think that there is a lot of fear-based marketing that is done on Index Universal Life, trying to pull money away from 401k plans, and not to mention the fact that if you stop putting money in your 401k plan, guess what you also don't get? The company match,
right? Which
is lost money. So I just, there is a lot there that to a person who is going to react knee-jerk style or emotionally about the market volatility that's going on right now, you can make Index Universal Life sound really good. You can also make a sow's ear sound pretty good too,
Right.
But it's just not necessarily the thing for you to do to replace any other type of investment that you might have, because, there's going to be taxes due on that money, or, it never goes down, or whatever their excuse is for trying to market that product.
Yeah, and I think the answer lies in her question, because she says, how do I know if I need it in my portfolio? Well, the guy trying to sell it to you without knowing a thing about you is certainly not acting in your best interest of whether knowing if you need it in your portfolio is really a foregone conclusion. So said another way, if you're seeing a commercial or a sales pitch for a specific investment product, no matter what that product is, that is a red flag, because we don't believe there's a magic investment. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. As John mentioned, I really like the way you said that. It doesn't have a personality. It's not a person. It's not good or bad.
That's right.
It depends on how it is used and who needs it to be used. Pitching a product over a plan is wrong.
So let's talk about how it could be used. A couple of things that I think about a permanent need for life insurance. An Index Universal Life Insurance policy can provide for that definitive need. However, you need to understand also that as you get older, the cost of insurance is going to continue to go up in an Index Universal Life policy. And so what's going to happen is internally that might outstrip the actual premium that you're paying, and so your cash value could go down. If the cash value goes down all the way to zero, then the policy lapses and you don't have any life insurance and you don't have any cash value. So that's the drawback of Index Universal Life. But if it is able to be structured where that permanency is in place, where you're funding it with enough money, then it can be a good value as far as the cash value life insurance category goes. So where can you use cash value life insurance? So if you have someone who has special needs and you don't have the means to fund those special needs after you're gone, that would be, a necessity for you to fund into your later years, 60s, 70s, 80s, something like that, cash value life insurance might be a solution there. Another area could be if you have an illiquid business and you're going to pass that business on to your family, and there would be estate taxes involved in that business. Then to provide the liquidity for those estate taxes, Index Universal Life might be a solution there. But Scott, I think we're nibbling at the edges of a traditional financial plan when we talk about this product. It is certainly not a mainstream product.
Right.
The GenWealth financial team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.